Hello everyone. Today is March 2nd, 2020, and we're going to be talking about some reflections from the prayer recollection with the scripture of Luke 14:25 through 35, and we have a really exciting ride today. So here we go. Let me read this for you. A large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, "If you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else, your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. You would say, 'There's a person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it.' Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. So you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how can you make it salty again? Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown away. Anyone who has ears to hear should listen and understand." So this is a really interesting scripture, and I've kind of been in this scripture for a few days now. I think it's been about 3 days, and I feel like each day God kind of keeps unpeeling a little bit more for me. But I'm just a student. I'm not a scholar, so these are just my reflections. So take them for what they're worth, and you can come up with your reflections, maybe totally different. I'd love to hear them. First, I'd like to unpack kind of how this scripture first struck me, and then we'll go into where it went from there, some of the changes in thinking that I had. I'm going to jump down first to verse 28, where it says, "But don't begin until you count the cost." And these were just a few of my initial reactions. One of my first thoughts was that Jesus counted his cost. Timothy Keller, I'm looking at my bookshelf, has a book, see if I can spot it. Oh no, it's downstairs right now, it's not on my bookshelf. It's called Encounters with Jesus. It has a great chapter on Jesus' experience in the Garden of Gethsemane before his crucifixion, the night before his crucifixion, and how he really did count his cost, and how he saw the horrificness of his death before he committed himself to it, so that he knew what he was committing to. It makes it such a beautiful, sacrificial, perfect act of love. So that was one reflection. And then I thought, he doesn't want us to be duped into following him. In other words, if you don't count the cost, and then you get in and he's kind of seems to be saying over and over, this is an all or nothing proposition. You don't want to get in and then find that out. Like, if you're going in, you want to know what you're committing to. And then I thought, let's go down here. What would it mean not to finish building the building? Maybe that would mean not giving up everything, or not completely dying to yourself. And then a little bit later, similar question, what would my army being too small look like? My unwillingness to give up everything I own, perhaps? So that was kind of my first pass through. Now, a few more recent reflections. I think maybe I was misunderstanding that in some ways. And I may be wrong here, so I'm going out on a limb. But first of all, I just want to commentary on the beginning where he says that we must hate our family by comparison to how we feel towards him, and even our own life, and carry our cross, which I assume means represents the total death to ourself. Well, as I reflect, at first that was a little bit abrasive, like, that's a little hard to swallow. I mean, if you're like me, you love your family, you're crazy about your family, your whole life seems to revolve around them sometimes. So that was a little bit hard. But then the more I reflected on it, the more I thought, especially in light of the teachings that we've been walking through with Luke, how could it be any other way? If it's an all or nothing proposition, then in comparison to how you feel about him, your love for your family, your love for yourself would be like comparable to hate. And that is true love for him. That is ultimate love, because then yourself and your family's not getting in the way, and what a burden that takes off of them, that they don't have to be what is bringing you meaning or significance in your life, that they're just icing on the cake, and Jesus is the cake. I mean, that's not a good analogy. Some of us might like the icing better, but hopefully you get the concept there. So as we go down a little bit, though, this is the part where it started to get interesting to me. In both of the examples, you see that the person was not prepared to pay the cost, which is obviously making his point. But it is interesting. I think that as I reflected on it, the reality is none of us can pay the cost. When we look at it and we think, can I pay what it's going to cost me to follow Jesus? No. If I completely crucify my every selfish desire, and if I, what does that part say? Give up everything I own so that everything is completely under his command and control in my life, it's still not enough. I can't pay that cost. And I think he was asking us to see, when we said count the cost, who's going to pay it? He's going to pay it. And he's on his way to Jerusalem to get ready to make payment. And as we give up everything for him, we only make room for him to come in and make his payment. It's not the giving up that makes the payment, it's the giving up that allows for the payment. And if we don't give up everything and see ourselves relative to him as hating ourselves, then there's not enough space for him to be everything. So, a little side note, it says, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's a person who started that building and can't afford to finish it. I don't get that. I mean, I get what he's saying. I don't understand why he said that. Is that because if we were to say, I'm a Christian, but we don't give up everything and allow him the space to come pay the cost for us, then we really weren't a Christian. And that's just laughable. That's worse than someone who says, Jesus, I see what you're offering, but I don't want it. I want to just do my own thing. I guess that's it. You can let me know if you have any more depth of thought on that. I also thought it was interesting where it says that he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. And I wondered if this wasn't us, if we are unwilling to make the sacrifice to let him into our lives and to give up everything, that basically what we will do is we will make a peace treaty with Satan and say, I'm not going to wage this battle against you, Satan. You can have your way with me. You can do what you want in my life. Don't consider me an obstacle to you. You don't even need to try to fight me. We're on the same side. I think that that is the majority of my reflections. I don't have a lot of clarity on that says flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. My understanding here is it's saying that if we aren't really letting him in, truly giving up everything and letting him in and letting him pay the cost, we're as worthless as salt that has no flavor. And I would assume that when you throw salt out in the soil or in the manure pile, that it is actually destructive for soil. And I would also assume that manure was not just gross waste as we would think of it as city slickers, but it was actually something of productive. I don't know, but this is just what I'm assuming with knowing my parents live on a farm, knowing a little bit about farming. Manure, especially back in the day, was really valuable or useful, perhaps is a better way to say that. Um, and to put flavorless salt on that, salt destroys bacteria, um, would take away the beneficial properties of both the soil and the manure. Um, but that's not, is that saying that the world, the people who don't love Jesus, are they soil and manure? And people who kind of made a half-hearted false attempt at loving Jesus are like taking away even their good properties? So I'm not real clear about that. Maybe you can let me know if you have anything there. But the more that I sat with this scripture, the more beauty that I saw in it. It was at first, it was really unpalatable to me, but as I started thinking about him paying that cost and how giving everything allows him the place to do where only his power can do, I was just so thankful and peaceful, and I praise you for that, Jesus.